giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
He's in. Joe Biden making it official with the release of his video just about less than an hour ago, becoming number 20 among Democrats to run for president, 20 in 2020. And not unexpected, but a long-awaited entry of Joe Biden into the presidential race. And with that breaking news, what do you say, everybody? Great to see you today. Here we go. It is Thursday, April 25. The Bill Press Show live from our nation's capital with you, joining you, right alongside of you, everywhere you are in this great land, wherever you are in this great land of ours. We're there with you online. We're there with you on the radio. We're there with you on television, bringing you the news of the day, the analysis and insight from the best guests we can round up, and your comments as well. Always welcome. And today, very honored and proud to be joined by one of those 20 Democratic candidates for president, former Congressman John Delaney from Maryland, the first one, I believe, to actually jump into the presidential race. We'll find out from him for sure. He is serious. He is running. He intends to be on stage in the first debate. And he'll be here to tell us why he's running, how he expects to win, and how you can help candidate John Delaney, Democrat, running for president. So lots going on. We want to hear from you, your comments on the news of the day on Twitter, @BP Show, on Twitter, @BP Show. Sound off. Lots to talk about today on Joe Biden and a whole lot more. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Well, Peter Rockburn is off, so the Full Court Press always the burden falls on me for this week. And I just wanted you to know that if you were looking for that special pet, there might be an opportunity. There is an auction today. It's going to be an auction online, or you can do it actually in person as well. It's an auction down in person. It will take place live in Florida, Gainesville, Florida. And it is organized by the Gulf Coast Livestock Auction. Now, here's what's interesting about this auction. So this is an auction of exotic animals that were once the property of a gentleman down in Florida, Mr. Marvin Ajos, I guess you put Hajos, Mr. Marvin Ajos. He had this whole collection of exotic animals, and they are now all up for sale. They include very colorful macaws. They include lemurs. They include kookaburras, whatever the hell they are. I don't even know. And here's the most important point. They also include several cassowaries. These cassowaries, I had to look them up to find out what they are. They are the ugliest birds, I think, that exist. They are huge birds. They have an almost prehistoric appearance. Their bright blue faces are topped with a horn-like ridge, just reading from the description of them, and their bodies, which can weigh up to 130 pounds, are covered with dark feathers. Now, there's one cassowary here that is pretty unusual because that cassowary is the bird that killed the owner of this menagerie. Killed the owner with his claws, and now because the family is just selling all the animals off, including the killer bird. So I would just say, talk about big bird. Yeah, if you're gonna be bidding on one of the cassowaries, I would suggest don't buy the one that killed the owner.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, the magic word, it is 20 for 2020. Yes, indeed, Joe Biden. Just less than an hour ago, making it official. Joe Biden in the race for president of the United States. Hello, everybody. What do you say? Welcome. Welcome to the Bill Press Show this Thursday, April 25. Great to see you today. We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C., our studio on Capitol Hill, with all the news of the day, whether it's happening here in Washington, around the country, or around the globe. We got it. We got it covered. We'll tell you all about it, and you tell us what it all means to you. We're joining you, of course, on every platform we can find. We're joining you online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. We're here with you on the radio statewide in Indiana on Indiana Talks. And Chicago, how about it? You're looking good, Chicago. We are there with you on WCPT, the great progressive voice of Chicago, and joining you, of course, on television as well, Free Speech TV. Great lineup of guests today. Julia Manchester, who reporter for The Hill, covering all things political for The Hill, will be joining us in just about a half an hour. And then Eliza Collins covers Congress for USA Today, one of our regular guests. And tapping off the show today in our last half hour, candidate for president, John Delaney, one of the 20 candidates for president, first one to jump into the race. Former member of Congress from Maryland's 6th Congressional District, a very successful businessman, served 3 terms in Congress, and now running for president. He'll be here to tell us why he's running, how he expects to beat out such giants as Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris, and, of course, now Joe Biden, and also how you can help if you're so inclined to do so after you hear what John Delaney has to say. So lots going on here, and don't forget, we always want to hear from you. Most importantly, send us your comments on Twitter, @BP Show, on Twitter, @BP Show. Joe Biden, yes, he is in. And the bumper sticker or the slogan, according to Gail Collins in the New York Times this morning, is "Vote for Joe. You can already spell his name." There it is. What does Joe Biden have to offer? Well, for one thing, he's got a lot of experience to offer and a lot of middle American values and character to offer as well. And he is presenting himself as the guy that can pull the entire party together and, most importantly, win those key Midwest states, which Hillary Clinton ignored and thereby lost. It was Joe Biden's video this morning. That's the way most of the candidates are doing it this time around, as we know. The video released today, and his big rally announcement official will be Monday in Pittsburgh. Here, just a few moments ago, Joe Biden.
Everything that has made America America is at stake. That's why today I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Okay, and Joe Biden says, he reflects a lot in this video on Charlottesville and what the president said in Charlottesville, how this does not represent America and how we've got to get back to what America is really all about.
I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are, and I cannot stand by and watch that happen.
Joe Biden, 76 years old, a year younger than Bernie Sanders, would be the oldest president ever elected. And be very interested in your comments, of course, on what do you think Joe Biden brings to this race. Interesting, I have found, just a little anecdotally, last night I joined a couple of friends from California, long time Democrats, very liberal Democrats, for dinner. And one of them said, I've been waiting, I've been watching this field. A lot of them are really exciting, but I don't think any of them can win. I'm waiting for Joe Biden. I was surprised, knowing how liberal she is, that was her choice. And then Carol and I hopped in a cab to come home from dinner. Cab driver was from Somalia. He's been here 30 years. He's an American citizen now. And as he recognized me, whatever. So we got to the house, and I paid. And then he said, now, before you get out, I just have one thing I have to say. And he started, and I had no idea where he was going about. He follows politics. He's met a lot of these candidates. He's watched them all. He watches CNN. He watches MSNBC. He watches Fox. He's a real political junkie. And he said, I'm telling you, Donald Trump is so dangerous for this country. And he said, and there's only one person who can beat him, Joe Biden. And I thought, holy, whoa, Biden's maybe got more support than we think. He's not as far left as Bernie Sanders nor Elizabeth Warren. He's a white male, but he does bring, and this is his third run for president. He doesn't have anywhere near the grassroots base or the fundraising base among certainly small donors that Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke have. But he does have that long experience in public service in the Senate and in the White House, of course, as vice president. And he does have that sort of blue-collar, down-home, next-door neighbor, working guy, Joe, that people like about him, and that solidity, if you will, or solidarity that he brings to the race. He is the favored candidate of several of the labor unions. He's going to Pittsburgh in a big rally that's sponsored by the United Steelworkers, one of the sponsors of our program. He has had the strong support the last time when we thought he might run in 2012 rather, and this time, one of his earliest supporters has been the firefighters union under the leadership of President Harold Scheitberger. Again, one of the big sponsors of the Bill Press show. So he'll have strong labor support, strong Middle America support, strong, I think, establishment Democratic support. And as of this moment, Politico this morning, the Morning Consult poll shows, and these early polls are not that meaningful, we know, but still, he starts out with an 8-point advantage over Donald Trump. 42-34 where the election held today, according to this Politico poll, which they released this morning as well. So on experience, and you know, the word that I've heard some people say about Joe Biden when they look at the entire field. And by the way, let me underscore again. I am not endorsing anybody in this race so far. I'm trying to give you a little analysis and insights into what I hear from other Democrats about Joe Biden and what strength I think he brings to the race. He's certainly not as exciting as Elizabeth Warren. Again, not as much a charger and a big, strong, progressive liberal as Bernie Sanders. The word that I hear people use about Joe Biden is he's normal. He brings a sense of normality, right? Kind of guy that everybody can like. And he's been the front runner in all the polls. So took him a little while to make up his mind. A little awkward about when's he going to announce this week or last week or Wednesday or Thursday. That's behind us. He's in and he is number 20 among the Democratic candidates. Changes the whole race. And by the way, meanwhile, on another front, and we'll get back to most of the other Democratic candidates who were in yesterday, were at the big She the People event down in Texas. We'll get to that in just a moment. But war is really opening up. It is just about all-out war now between Donald Trump and the United States Congress. As we know, Congress, now the Democrats control the House, they are proceeding in several committees to take a look at, to exercise, do their job, put it bluntly, do their job, exercise their oversight responsibility, and they've started hearings in the House Banking Committee, the Oversight Committee, the Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, to look at some of the issues, among others, that are raised in the Mueller report. What about these 10 different occasions on which, according to the special counsel, Donald Trump actively tried to obstruct justice? How serious are they? And so the House wanted to know more about that. What about Donald Trump's finances? What about these hush money payments to the porn stars? So many issues that got no attention, no scrutiny at all when Republicans had control of the House. So those hearings are underway, and in order to get the information they need to conduct the hearings, the House Democrats have either requested documents or sent subpoenas out to obtain documents and to get certain witnesses to testify, in response to which the Trump administration, starting with Donald Trump himself, has said, we are not going to cooperate in any way whatsoever with any of the Democratic committees. Meaning we're not going to turn over any documents, we're not going to provide any witnesses, we're not going to appear, we're not going to cooperate again in any way whatsoever. And Donald Trump says, if they insist, if they push it, we will take it all the way to the Supreme Court, which means we're going to have, I think, a classic constitutional clash over the separation of powers. Can the executive just stiff-arm the legislative branch and say, we will not cooperate with you any way whatsoever? Donald Trump made this very clear yesterday. He and the First Lady went down to Atlanta, Georgia on his way out. Pardon me. He stopped talking to reporters, and this is how he now refers to the Robert Mueller team, the FBI. These are all Department of Justice employees, right? For Donald Trump, they're the 18 angry Democrats.
We just went through the Mueller witch hunt where you had really 18 angry Democrats that hate President Trump. They hate him with a passion. They were contributors in many cases to Hillary Clinton. Hate him with a passion. How they picked this panel, I don't know. And they came up with no collusion, and they actually also came up with no obstruction. But our Attorney General ruled, based on the information, there was no obstruction. So you have no collusion, no obstruction.
Yeah, but of course that's not what the report says. That's what Donald Trump says. That's what Bill Barr said. The report concluded when you read the report, and I will remind you, I've got it. Whole report right here. I've been reading a little bit of it every day. That's not what the report says. The report says there was lots of collusion, just not enough to constitute a criminal conspiracy. And the report documents at least 10 occasions on which Donald Trump did try to obstruct justice. So the really summation of the report is lots of collusion, lots of attempts to obstruct justice, no crime committed so far. And on the obstruction of justice, we know Robert Mueller didn't even reach a decision. He punted on whether or not the crime had committed on obstruction of justice. So Donald Trump continues to sum it up that way. He also claims, of course, that we have done, this is funny, at the same time he's pledging to obstruct and get in the way of anything Congress tries to do, he brags about being the most transparent administration ever.
I have been the most transparent president and administration in the history of our country by far.
This says the man who will not release his tax returns. First president in modern days not to do so, Republican or Democrat. This is the same man who would not testify, would not meet with the special counsel, Robert Mueller. This is the same man who 30 times in response to the written question submitted to him by Robert Mueller said, I can't remember, I don't recall, or whatever. And this is a man who lied about hush money payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal until he was caught and Michael Cohen admitted the truth. So he's the least. And this, I might also say, this is the administration that has not held a White House briefing in almost 50 days now. I think it may be 50 days now. Only 2 briefings entirely, 2 briefings so far this year. The least transparent administration that we've had ever, probably. And back to the, just skipping down, McKenna, to what he says about cooperating with members of Congress. Get this. He's not going to cooperate with them, he says, because they are not impartial.
These aren't like impartial people. The Democrats are trying to win 2020. They're not going to win with the people that I see. and they're not going to win against me. The only way they can maybe luck out, and I don't think that's going to happen, it might make it even the opposite. That's what a lot of people are saying. The only way they can luck out is by constantly going after me on nonsense.
I love that. The Democrats are not impartial people. Duh. Yeah, right. They're Democrats. Do you think the Republicans are impartial people? Do you think for the last 2 years under Donald Trump, when the Republicans just said, what do you want, Mr. President? Yes, 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 yes. Held no oversight hearings whatsoever. None. You don't think they were playing the political card and what was best for their party when they controlled the Congress? Yeah, sure they were. So are the Democrats doing the same thing right now. Donald Trump just hasn't accepted the fact that there are 3 branches of government and not everybody is there just to work for him. And the Congress has its role, which he still has not accepted. At any rate, even on the subject of impeachment, Donald Trump says if they start impeachment hearings, he will go to the Supreme Court to say they have no right to hold impeachment hearings. Of course they do. You've heard me say I don't think it's the best move for Democrats to do right away. I think they ought to focus on these hearings and focus on the 2020 campaign and building the best case they can against Donald Trump. But Congress certainly has the right to hold impeachment hearings. They've certainly got the right to hold oversight hearings. And I would say also that just as the legislative branch has a duty and responsibility to work with the executive to do what's best for the people of this country, the executive has a duty and responsibility to work with the legislative branch to do what's best for the American people as well. It's not just a one-way street. And on that point as well, one more case of not being so transparent. Yesterday was the second deadline for the president given by Congress for the Treasury Department to turn over the president's tax returns. Once again, for the second time, the Treasury Department refused to do so, but they said they would make a decision on whether or not they're going to release the president's tax returns. They'll make that decision, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said yesterday, by May the 6th. May 6th. Yeah, and you watch. May 6th, which is just next week, end of next week, they will they'll announce officially they're never going to do so. Now we go back to, I mentioned, this big She the People concert held down in Texas yesterday. So these are basically women of color who banded together in an organization and had this big rally, invited all the candidates to, I think most of the candidates at any rate. It's the She the People Presidential Forum, hosted in Houston. And the question put to all of the candidates was, and I have very interesting responses, I think. We are women of color. We are political activists. We are Democrats. Why should we vote for you? A very interesting question when there was only one woman of color among the candidates, and that is Kamala Harris. But they all took their turn. Here, in no particular order, Amy Klobuchar.
I can't pretend to be in your shoes. I'm in one of your shoes as the first woman in many of the jobs I've had, and I know what it's like to be in that room when people aren't taking you seriously.
Yeah, so at least in that one sense, I thought that was a good point. She has been in many jobs, including, I think, Attorney General of Minnesota, the first woman in that job. That qualifies her. Bernie Sanders just has to say, and does so pretty persuasively, look at my record.
Look at my record and look at what I have campaigned on. Many of the ideas that I brought forth 4 years ago are now widely accepted by the American people and Democratic candidates from school board to President of the United States. So my campaign is about not just winning the nomination, not just defeating Trump. It is the understanding that we cannot transform this country unless millions of people, black and white and Latino, Asian American, Native American, stand up and take on the very powerful greedy special interests who dominate the economic and political life of this country.
Bernie Sanders, he's always in high gear, pardon me, it seems. And Beto O'Rourke, again, he sort of goes back to what is the thrust of his entire campaign is going around holding as many events as he can and not really coming out with any big policy proposals, but just listening to what people have to say.
Not something that I'm owed, not something that I expect, something that I fully hope to earn by the work that I do on the campaign trail, by showing up and listening to the people that I want to serve.
And Cory Booker scores here, I think, by pointing out that he says, I am where I am because of a very strong woman of color.
You know, as a man that was raised by a strong black woman who understood and taught me from my very earliest of ages the debt that I owe, women of color can trust me as someone for my entire career has been rooted in the communities that have empowered me to be who I am today.
And I have to say that once again, she is so good in front of a crowd. Elizabeth Warren, just as I thought she excelled in the CNN town hall Monday night from New Hampshire, St. Anselm's in New Hampshire, she really read this room correctly, I think, yesterday, identifying with the women who are there and inspiring them. So again, why should you support me? Elizabeth Warren, I identify with you.
We got a room full of people here who weren't given anything. We got a room full of people here who had to fight for what they believe in. We have a room full of people here who had to reach down deep, and no matter how hard it was, no matter how scary it looked, they found what they needed to find, and they brought it up, and they took care of the people they loved. They fought the fights they believe in. That's how they got into these seats today. It's how are we going to fight? Not just individually, but how are we going to fight together? Are we going to fight because we're afraid? Are we going to show up for people that we didn't actually believe in, but because we were too afraid to do anything else? That's not who we are. That's not how we're going to do this.
Yep, turning them on there, Elizabeth Warren. Julian Castro also saying, I am, like Cory Booker, sort of, I am where I am because of a couple of proud women of color.
I am only here because of two very strong women of color. I have dedicated my time in public service to making sure that people just like my mother and my grandmother could do better in this country. It's why I focused in my time as mayor and as HUD secretary so much on trying to deliver for communities that are vulnerable, that are struggling.
And finally, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, the one woman of color running for president of the United States, saying again, this is my career. This is what I've been fighting for. You can trust me to continue that.
I am a leader on the issue of maternal mortality that invariably and disproportionately impacts women of color, on my history and long-term work in terms of education, including what I'm proposing right now, which is to close the teacher pay gap, which will disproportionately impact children of color and the women of color that are raising them. For my work on criminal justice reform, my work when it comes to economic security and health for women and women of color. There is a long history of work I have done, including my mentorship of young women of color in politics and in the professions. And I would stake my reputation in terms of what I will do going forward based on what I've done, and I believe you can judge me that way.
There it is. Yep, all of them lining up there in front of the people yesterday, and that is, of course, one day before Joe Biden pops in. Joe Biden, by the way, just a little footnote on that, endorsed this morning for president by two fellow senators, well, not fellow senators, but two senators, his fellow Democrat, Chris Coons, and the senator from his home state of Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, both endorsing Joe Biden this morning. So off to a good start. Dianne Feinstein from California has previously endorsed Joe Biden. The only other senators who have endorsed, as I recall, Pat Leahy has endorsed, of course, Bernie Sanders, right? And one other, forget now, that has a home state advantage at any rate. But those three. And finally, just listening to those Democratic candidates yesterday, I was struck this morning by some letters to the editor of the New York Times on this whole, okay, we got 20 candidates. How do we choose from? Do we go for a woman, a person of color, LGBT candidate, or what? And these letters reflect what I've been hearing more and more from Democrats around the country is forget identity politics. Forget whether it's a man or a woman or black or white. I just want somebody who can beat Donald Trump. I don't care who it is. I just want somebody who's going to beat Donald Trump. Let me just read part of this first letter in the letters to the editor this morning in the New York Times. This is from a woman, Betsy Frank, New York. No idea who she is. She said about, do Democrats need a white male as a face of the party or a woman of color? What is it? She says, and I wanted a woman, a very specific woman, to win the presidency in 2016. When she didn't, I mourned and then looked ahead to 2020. Now we have a large, impressive, and diverse group of potential Democratic candidates, including a good percentage of dynamic and highly qualified women. Great. But the argument that the candidate to take on and defeat Donald Trump must be a woman or a person of color is absurd, says, again, Betsy Frank of New York. Where is it written that a man cannot represent women, or a white person cannot represent people of color, or a 70-year-old cannot represent millennials, or a gay white man cannot represent straight biracial America? We need to select the most qualified person, not the one who seems to check the diversity boxes. And I hear that from more and more people. We've got a great field of candidates. Again, one of them, John Delaney, is going to be our guest just about an hour from now. And the key is not which box you check. The only box that counts is who can beat Donald Trump. Who is the strongest candidate? Who's got the strongest message against Donald Trump? I agree with that letter. I think that's what we've got to be looking for. And I'm not sure of that person yet. Maybe you are. I'm not quite yet. So lots going on here this morning. Julia Manchester joins us next from The Hill to continue talking about the big news of the day. The biggest story, of course, is Joe Biden jumping into the race. It is the Bill Press Show on this Thursday, April 25. Good to have you with us. Take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
Georgia.
There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children. She didn't know what to do.
Did you have a good day at school?
She gave them some broth without any bread.
There you go.
And kissed them all soundly.
Night night.
Good night. And put them to bed. Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here. But an awkward silence can be a great thing. It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down. It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl? You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them. Go on, Kelly. It's easy awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Do you want to retire like a champ? Just like legendary basketball star Uncle Drew? Don't do it like that, Uncle Drew! You're already acing the game. You've got your dream ride.
Don't be slamming my door.
Sorry about that. You just did the same.
Gotta get the boys.
Your dream vacation and your dream team. And now you can make your retirement just as legendary.
I get buckets.
Get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
You got it. Thursday, April 25. Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Bill Press Show, booming out to you live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and our studio on Capitol Hill, where we're brought to you today by the United Steelworkers and their very energetic and colorful international president, Leo Gerard. The United Steelworkers are the hosts of Joe Biden on Monday as he officially launches his campaign with a big rally in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the headquarters of the United Steelworkers. I've been there at their headquarters. They are North America's largest industrial union, representing over 1.2 million active and retired members, and one of the unions that has encouraged Joe Biden to get into the race. Check out their website at United Steelworkers, or USW, just simply USW.org. As you know, we've, first of all, let's welcome to the studio, joining us from the great Hill newspaper, thehill.com. You know I have a particular bias toward the Hill because I'm a columnist for the Hill on Tuesday. Julia Manchester, sort of a roundabout political reporter on everything for the Hill.
Yes, thank you for having me today.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. Yeah. We've been sort of beating the drums here for the last 40 minutes or so. And McKenna stirring up some comments, and we have a little poll going too here, right?
Yes, the poll has 9 minutes left, so you still have time
my God.
to answer.
All right. Oh, how exciting.
Very exciting.
The question is?
The question is, do you agree with Bernie Sanders' view that people in prison should have the right to vote?
Mm-hmm.
So far, we have 50% saying good idea, 36% saying bad idea, and 14% saying no opinion. And we have Bad Mama Jamma Chris saying, voting is a right, not a reward for good behavior. Come on, Americans. And you can do that poll. You still have 9 minutes.
So you haven't already done so, go to BillPressShow.com and vote on that particular poll. And Julia, the big story, not a big surprise, except what day it was finally going to happen, but Joe Biden finally made it official this morning, a little over an hour ago, with his video, and where he touched on a lot of the themes we're going to be hearing from him, right? That Donald Trump has taken this country in the wrong direction, and he is the one who can right the ship. We've heard some of the audio of the video before. Here's another little clip from Joe Biden's video this morning.
Folks, America's an idea that's stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It gives hope to the most desperate people on earth. It guarantees that everyone is treated with dignity and gives hate no safe harbor.
So I guess he's presenting himself as the grown-up in the room, or the experienced person, right?
Absolutely. And what really struck me about this video, Bill, was looking at the other candidates' announcements, some of their rhetoric, their appearances. They're obviously talking about Donald Trump, but they're talking more, coming out of the gate, more about policy. And that might be because they don't have the same kind of name recognition and influence Joe Biden has. But Joe Biden, he'll get to those policies like health care, gun control, but he's coming out of the gate really going after Donald Trump and using Charlottesville. Really, I think that his strategy there is he knows it's going to stir up some headlines, and he's really appealing to this one factor that unifies Democrats and progressives. You hear a lot about there being this divide within the Democratic Party, the progressives versus the establishment. But there's one thing they all agree on, is that they want to beat Donald Trump, and they need to beat Donald Trump. And this is Joe Biden really coming out and saying, here's how I'm going to do that. Here's how I'm going to unify this party. So it'll be interesting to see how the other candidates react. He's already getting two popular Senate endorsements this morning from Chris Coons and Bob Casey. So he's had a successful launch this morning, I would say. However, he also has a fundraising event tonight that is being hosted by an executive from Comcast Universal. Mm-hmm. I think that will be interesting to see how candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren react to that, because that's obviously a major corporate donor. And obviously we know how they feel about the influence of corporations in politics. So Joe Biden completely changing the dynamic of this race in just an hour.
They have proven, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have proven that you do not need political action committees, you don't need big PACs, and you don't need big corporations, or you don't need big checks to fuel a presidential campaign. Joe Biden doesn't have that capacity. He's going to have to do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, he doesn't, and this does not surprise me at all.
Meaning big donors,
yes,
fundraising dinners, receptions, the way people used to do it.
Exactly.
Get as many people to write the biggest check you can.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is how he's been doing politics for decades now. And, this is how, I think Obama, obviously, his campaign with Obama had a grassroots movement, but nothing to the same capacity that Bernie Sanders has had, for an example. So it'll be interesting to see how those kind of two machines, the grassroots machine versus the more establishment machine, really face up in this election. Because, obviously, in 2016, Hillary Clinton ended up, coming out on top in all of that. But I think this is a completely different race this time. And Bernie Sanders does have more name recognition. He does have a bigger donor list this time. So
is part of what people are looking for in Biden, is it sort of, okay, we tried to win with a woman in 2016 and we failed. Now we need to go back to the safer way with a sort of dependable white male.
So when I look at Biden, the gender question doesn't necessarily pop up in my mind first. With Biden, I think more of the question is, how does he appeal to those blue-collar, working-class voters in formerly Democratic states that flipped for Donald Trump in 2016, such as Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? Joe Biden obviously has very deep blue-collar roots, and he's been able to very much connect with those voters. However, on the gender front...
that seems to be one of his strengths.
Yes.
Considered by a lot of Democrats, is he can appeal to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, right?
Yes. However,
states Democrats need
absolutely
didn't get in 2016.
Absolutely. And I would say on the
Trump country.
Right. On the gender front, though, I do believe, we hear, I guess the gender and race front, if you will, we keep on hearing about the need to get these blue collar voters, et cetera, et cetera. The Democratic Party still needs to galvanize its base, which is largely made up of minorities and women. And obviously, we're seeing suburban women increasingly moving towards the Democratic Party. We saw it in 2018 in those midterms. So I think Joe Biden, I think any ticket on the Democratic side right now needs to be diverse. So I would be shocked, if Joe Biden, for example, got the nomination. That's a hypothetical. I'd be shocked if he didn't pick a woman. We saw Cory Booker come out yesterday and, tell a publication that he vowed to pick a woman. So I think gender
Cory Booker is the only one who has said there will be a woman on my ticket as vice president.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think it's going to be very important.
But I think you're right.
Right. And I think it's going to be important for
It's
Biden
not going to be two
this time.
white men.
No, it can't
sure.
be. They need to contrast themselves with Trump and Pence as much as possible. And I think for Biden, picking a woman is very important because although they weren't necessarily sexual assault allegations, I do think these allegations of inappropriate touching, how he's behaved towards women in the past, Republicans are going to use that, even though Donald Trump has talked openly about, sexual assault. We saw it on that Access Hollywood tape. Republicans are still going to use that. So I think it's very important that Joe Biden focuses on this issue of gender on this campaign.
One of the features that you do on the Hill with our good friend Jamal Simmons is What's America Thinking, right?
Yeah.
Polls on breaking news almost every day.
Exactly.
What are Americans thinking about the Mueller report?
So we've done some
We know what Donald Trump is thinking. No collusion, no obstruction.
We hear it every day on Twitter.
Yeah.
So Americans are very dug in on their views on the Mueller report. So we did a poll a couple of days ago that found that 76% of Americans say that the redacted version of the Mueller report that was released last week didn't necessarily change their mind. I think Americans, although the vast majority wanted to see it in its entirety or as much of it as they possibly could, they've already made a decision on it, so I don't think it's necessarily going to change many people's minds ahead of 2020. I think people know what they have their opinions on the Mueller report set. And in terms of voting,
so it didn't change many minds.
No, it didn't. And then in terms of, I guess, issues in voting, I think obviously, and I want to be careful how I say this, obviously Americans believe the report is important and, they're concerned about the extent that Russia was able to influence the U.S. 2016 election. However, I think 2018 showed us that kitchen table issues such as healthcare and the economy are priorities. So I think Democrats in Congress right now need to be careful to walk that fine line ahead of 2020 and how they approach this Mueller report, because although it's important to the American people, it's not necessarily the top of that priority list.
Well, which is a point that several Democrats have made when they're asked the question about impeachment. I mean, not quoting word for word, but in the CNN town hall Monday evening, when Bernie Sanders was asked, Bernie said, clearly the president's done a lot of things wrong. But if for the next year and a half, all we're talking about is Trump, Mueller, Mueller, we're not talking about healthcare. We're not talking about climate change. We're not talking about education. We're not talking about jobs. We're not talking about minimum wage. We're not talking about the things that people really care about. And that is it's a black hole that Democrats could fall into.
Exactly. And I think Warren, with her calculation and coming out and calling for impeachment proceedings to begin in the House, I think it's interesting because Warren, compared to people like other candidates like Beto O'Rourke or Pete Buttigieg, she's actually put so much emphasis on policy. She's talked quite a bit about policy. I would say some political consultants would say maybe a little too much for the campaign trail. But I think in her comments about impeachment, she's really setting a trend within on the campaign trail right now, because after she said that, we saw that Julian Castro, Wayne Messam, the Miramar, Florida mayor who is in the race, and Kamala Harris.
God, I forgot about him.
There's so many. It's hard to keep track. And then Kamala Harris, they all essentially followed suit. So, she's kind of been lagging in the polls behind Sanders, Biden, sometimes O'Rourke and Buttigieg. But this is her way of, I think, drawing attention to that issue and creating some more name recognition for herself in this race.
Yeah, she has been, even more than Bernie Sanders, out in front on policy pronouncements.
Absolutely.
Almost every time she speaks. And she's and as you point out, she's the first one to say, got to start in response to the Mueller report, have to start the impeachment hearings right away.
Definitely.
And others have followed her lead. Not everybody, but
definitely.
And I think she was the first one who came out saying, we got to get rid of the Electoral College.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I feel like with this, everyone's talking about the Biden-Bernie dynamic, but I'm actually interested, especially ahead of the debates, to see how Warren and Bernie play out, because there's going to be this huge battle for the progressive vote. So, I think that's going to be one of the key battles. I mean, I'm very interested in seeing how that plays out.
I've talked about that too. To me, they're in the same lane, and only one person in the end is going to be in that lane.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think Bernie has a huge advantage, having run before when she didn't, having built up that base, having kept that base alive, the grassroots base and the fundraising base. And so she's got to overtake him in that lane. And Bernie put the ideas out there, which almost everybody's espousing now, including Elizabeth Warren. But now she's taking it even further.
Yeah,
right? And so, and I think that's a real challenge for her to knock Bernie off the progressive perch, right?
Absolutely. And I think her recent comments about student debt, her student debt proposal in the Senate, I mean, that's a huge play for that progressive millennial base that has been very much behind Bernie Sanders. That's a huge play for them. And her comments about impeachment, I mean, this is her really trying to rally up that support, rally up those donors ahead of these debates, because I think, this is a preparation for the debates. I really think it is, because we're going to see how her and Sanders really differentiate themselves. Who can be the most progressive?
So, by the way, if your polling shows that 79% of the American people are kind of
dug in,
right? But that means those who didn't like Donald Trump maybe still don't like him and don't like him even more. But it also means that the Donald Trump base is dug in, and no matter what the report says, they're not shaken at all.
Absolutely. But there was some polling earlier this week from Morning Consult, and we've watched his approval ratings for months now, and it always seems to be in this mid 40% range. Sometimes it drops a couple points under, sometimes a couple points over. He was down at 39%.
Right, went down from 44 to 39.
Yes, and that to me shows some sort of crack in his base. And this is pure speculation on my part, but we often slam Democrats for talking too much about the Mueller report. Well, that criticism also goes towards Donald Trump. And as much as Donald Trump says no collusion, well, he seems to be denying it so much on Twitter. It's like, well, why don't you try to focus on other policy proposals? He's out there talking about it just as much with all this denial. His personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, also making news on this. So I don't think he necessarily helps himself with his base, because I think his base also wants to see him follow through on his policy promises, whether it's the wall or tax cuts, which he did follow through with. They want to see that, that progress as well.
Or maybe even $1 trillion plan for infrastructure.
Sure.
On that front, there is there's no doubt the Republican Party today is the party of Donald Trump. There's no doubt that he has, 88% support among Republicans. But it's not universal. There's at least one person who is going around the country talking about the possibility of, we know William Weld is already in. I don't think anybody takes William Weld that seriously. He's a good man, but...
Right.
But, however, there's somebody else running around the country. He's been to 10 states already. He has 16 more states that he says he's going to visit before he makes up his mind, and that's Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who was asked yesterday up at the Politics and Egg Breakfast at St. Anselm's in New Hampshire, Manchester, about the fact that the Republican National Committee has basically put out an edict. You have to support Donald Trump or you are out of the Republican Party. Here's Larry Hogan.
I was pretty critical of that. Not that the Republican National Committee doesn't have the right to support the sitting president, but to change the rules and to insist 100% loyalty to the dear leader, it just didn't sound... It didn't sound very much like the Republican Party that I grew up in.
The dear leader.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hear those characters like Larry Hogan, John Kasich, former Senator Jeff Flake really make a lot of these comments. We really have yet to see really a resistance within the Republican Party forming.
Or anybody willing to stand up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of talk on cable news at this point, but nothing has really formulated. So
And Larry Hogan looks like an unlikely candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think for a Republican, he's done a fairly good job as in a blue state as being governor. He certainly got reelected, right?
Yes.
And he hasn't. There's not been any major scandal, right?
No,
I think, or anything that's gotten him national condemnation or anything. So I mean, he's not flamboyant like Donald Trump, but he's a sort of an old-fashioned Republican, and he may be willing to do it. He said that he's had. I hope he does. He has said he has lots of time to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
He's in no rush, no hurry, and he's right now the only one out there. All the other people you mentioned, John Kasich, Bob Corker, Jeff Flake, not going to do it.
Yeah.
So we're left with, I think, a guy who's almost a clown, William Weld.
Right. And I mean, I think in terms of anyone who challenges Donald Trump, I think they would know that most likely they will not they could make major headway publicly and presenting a major public challenge to him. I think they know that they most likely will not win because of the support that Donald Trump has among Republicans. But I think one thing, if Larry Hogan does decide to mount a challenge against Donald Trump, I think he'll struggle a bit with name recognition. I mean, I think outside of Maryland, outside of the East Coast, not many Americans really know who he is, necessarily like a Donald Trump or even a John Kasich, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. And so far, Donald Trump has not attacked him on Twitter. But
very good point.
So I guess he doesn't take him that seriously, else he would.
No nickname.
No, exactly. I don't think he's come up with a nickname yet.
I don't think he has. We'll see.
Lazy Larry, crazy Larry. Who knows?
There's some ideas.
He's good at that. What are your, in terms of what Americans thinking? What are the issues that, if it's not Mueller report, what are the issues that people say that they really healthcare still number one?
For Democrats, definitely healthcare. For Republicans, immigration and the economy. And I think it's interesting to look at how 2018 played out. We saw that Democrats were healthcare, and Republicans, much influenced by Donald Trump, were immigration. And I think Donald Trump, with his recent comment, threatening to close down the border, shutting off aid to the Northern Triangle, Central American countries, that's a ploy for him to really appeal to his base. And I think in terms of immigration, Donald Trump, in talking about that, is making, I think, a huge risk because he knows that his political base likes that. And I think he feeds off of that energy. He likes when they respond positively to that. But he's pushing away, like I mentioned before, those suburban voters who would have voted for Romney in 2012, but voted for Democrats in some cases Hillary Clinton in 2016. So he's pushing away those more moderate centrist Republicans, which are increasingly leaning more left. So that's a major political risk. And I don't think it's as risky for Democrats to talk about health care because Obamacare has been the law of the land now for over a decade roughly.
Right.
So it's a popular law. I mean, it might not have been extremely popular after it was rolled out, but people are used to it now. And I don't think changing and revamping the entire healthcare system, I don't think Americans, and polling shows this, they're not crazy about that. That's very stressful. People don't like that kind of change. They're used to it.
I've said it before. Donald Trump has succeeded where Obama never could, which is making Obamacare popular.
Yes.
And part of it is just simply it's been around so long now. People are into it. They're enjoying its benefits. They depend on its benefits, and taking it away is politically very risky for them.
Absolutely.
That wraps it up. Julia, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Follow Julia Manchester and all of our good friends at The Hill at thehill.com. Eliza Collins from USA Today joins us next.
Press Show. bringing you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It's now 20 for 2020. That's an easy way to remember it. 20 candidates as of this morning, with Joe Biden making it official, releasing his video. He is running for president as a Democrat in 2020. Not unexpected, and he has been ahead in the polls even without being a candidate, and he actually starts out ahead of Donald Trump in the polls this morning. Hello, everybody. What do you say? It is the Bill Press Show. Here we go. Joining you for the next hour from our studio on Capitol Hill. Very excited to bring you today Eliza Collins from USA Today. Eliza, nice to see you as always.
Good to be here.
Covers Congress for USA Today. And then about a half an hour from now, one of those 20 Democratic candidates for the year 2020, John Delaney, former congressman from Maryland, the first one to actually jump into the race, will be here in studio with us to make his pitch and tell you why he's running and how he expects to win in that field of 20 against such big names as Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden as of this morning. So lots and lots we have to talk about. And we look forward to, and by the way, there's this other thing going on, which basically Donald Trump has declared war against House Democrats, saying he's not going to cooperate in any way whatsoever. Eliza, we have to get into that and find out how that ends up, and or how it might end up, and what some of the stories are what we're going to see on that front as well. So lots to talk about. We will get right into all of those big stories of the day. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of this is Peter's job. I know. I just try to fill in when Peter's gone with a couple of off-the-wall stories. Eliza, I don't know whether you saw about the governor's mansion, the governor down in Louisiana.
No.
Well, they had a little surprise yesterday. So the governor's mansion is like most governor's mansions, I guess. It's a very highly secure property,
right?
Surrounded by guards. They have a fence. They have a gate, and then there's this whatever expansive lawn, and then there's the governor's mansion. Some guy managed, 34 years old, to work his way a couple of days ago night before last, through security, through the gate, over the fence. They have no idea how
he ended up
got into the governor's mansion. The police are being very tight-lipped. They will not say whether the governor was in the residence at the time or not, but probably.
Right.
You know, it reminds me it was a few years ago.
I was just going to say that. It got up the stairs at the White House, right?
Oh, no. I was talking about when the Queen, remember the Queen of England? Some guy, she woke up and there was some guy in her bedroom that got through security at Buckingham Palace.
How does that happen?
That's it. This guy in Louisiana was a little less scary. He got in and got into the mansion and fell asleep on the couch.
That's amazing.
So
it was too much work to get in. Then
I guess so.
To rest.
Yeah, fell asleep on the couch. That's how they.
Wow.
Right. They just discovered him snoozing out on the couch.
And had no idea how
embarrassing to the law enforcement there, right? Yeah. And then the other thing is, I want to mention, this is the big White House Correspondents' Dinner. You're going to be there?
I will be there.
Saturday night?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to be as exciting as it has been in the past because the Washington Post looked at this morning at all the different tables to see who are the big stars that are going to be there this year. They found one.
Who is the big star?
Jay Leno.
Really?
That's hardly worth getting your black tie on for, right? With all due respect.
It used to be everybody.
It used to be. I've seen there, George Clooney, Barbara Streisand. You go down the list. Steve Spielberg, right? Chevy Chase. I mean, Sharon Stone. They were all there, right?
And it's Jay Leno.
No,
then the host or the keynote is no longer a comedian.
No. Presidential historian.
Right.
I think it's going to be Snoozeville, right? Saturday night. But we'll have a good time anyway.
It'll be fun.
This is the Bill Press Show.
He's in. Yep, he made it official this morning with his video. Joe Biden, former vice president, now running for president. It's his third time, and maybe presenting the third term of the Obama administration in the person of Vice President Joe Biden. Hello, everybody. What do you say? The Bill Press Show, Thursday, April 25. Great to see you today. Thanks for being with us online, on the radio, and on television as we join you from our studio on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and reaching out to you coast to coast, wherever you happen to be in this great land of ours. We're there with you to talk about the news of the day with the help of Eliza Collins, who covers the Congress for USA Today. And Eliza, 2 United States senators already this morning jumped in. Dianne Feinstein had said ahead of time from California, sort of ignoring her fellow Senator Kamala Harris, that her candidate, if he were to run, would be Joe Biden. So we have to assume she's now she's officially, because he's in officially. I think she'll live up to that pledge, knowing Dianne. But 2 other senators joined this morning. Chris Coons from Delaware,
who has Biden's old
seat and a good friend of Biden, no surprise, and Bob Casey from Pennsylvania,
where Biden is from,
where Biden was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, right? So, and very much a centrist, both Coons and Casey, a centrist Democrat. We've heard several clips from Joe Biden this morning. Here's one more little taste of that video.
And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
So he makes a lot in the video of Charlottesville and the contrast with Charlottesville, right? So what impact do you think this has on the race?
Well, Biden gets in as the front runner. He's leading in all the polls. He has, let's assume, the highest name recognition because he was the vice president. He's been around for a really long time. He's run for president before. But the best day is the day you get in the race, and then it usually goes down from there. But Biden does come in with a lot of name ID. With that video, it's interesting because his focus on Charlottesville, that is one of the few times we saw Republicans really separate themselves from the president and speak out against the president after his reaction to Charlottesville. We've seen it on trade. We've seen it on his meeting with Putin, but that's about it. And Republicans there was certainly more distance with some and the president after Charlottesville than after the Mueller report came out. So Biden has found this event to talk about that does make Republicans uncomfortable. And he's sort of appealing to that middle section, the moderate Republicans, the independents, that may very well be uncomfortable by the way the president handled Charlottesville.
Is he too old?
I don't know. I have no idea what the electorate wants, right? I mean,
it's sort of like I think that Bernie Sanders sort of killed the age issue 4 years ago, right?
Right.
When he not only did as well as he did, but he did particularly well among the youngest voters.
Right. Right. And we had, the president is not super young either. Hillary Clinton was at the same age range. And these people, Biden is energetic. I think, like you said, Bernie changed the game because he was an older white man and young voters went for him. So Biden could do that too.
Gail Collins points out this morning in the New York Times that so you have Joe Biden at 76 and you've got Pete Buttigieg at 37, right? She points out Buttigieg is younger than Beyonce.
Wow.
Biden is younger than Ringo Starr, but he's older than Mick Jagger.
Wow.
So, what does it all mean anymore,
that's the
right?
thing is, what do voters want after Trump? Are they looking for someone with lots of experience? Because Biden certainly has that. Or are they looking for someone, are they still looking for sort of an outsider candidate who will come into Washington fresh? Because that is sort of more of a Buttigieg. Sanders has kind of captured that, although he's been in the Senate quite a while himself. But what are voters looking for? And we don't know.
No. And by the way, you mentioned certainly name ID. Joe Biden's got that, and Bernie Sanders does too, right?
Absolutely.
And Elizabeth Warren may be in third place on that score. In terms of the polls, even before he became a candidate, every poll that I've seen, Joe Biden is always up number one, Bernie usually number two. Morning Consult Politico is out this morning with a poll that shows that were the election held today, Joe Biden would have an 8-point advantage over Donald Trump, 42 to 34, which is interesting. As you said, the best day is
Today.
when you announce, right?
But I will say Biden gives Republicans heartburn. When I ask, just folks, sources all the time, who makes you the most nervous? And they always say Biden first. And then there's various ideas after that who's second. And sometimes it's kind of like the Buttigieg because he's more surprising and he's just the complete opposite of Trump. Or sometimes it's Kamala Harris because she can appeal to women and she is a black woman. But it's always Biden first.
Mm-hmm. And we remind you that John Delaney, who is as big a candidate, as real a candidate, shall we say, maybe not as big in the polls as Joe Biden, one of the 20, will be joining us just about 20 minutes from now here in studio to tell us why he's running and how he thinks he can beat this pack and end up number one, the Democratic nominee for president. John Delaney, former congressman from Maryland, coming up next. So yesterday, Eliza, on his way out to Marine One, on his way to Andrews Air Force Base, go down to Atlanta, Georgia, the president back on a familiar attack on the Mueller team, first of all, whom he calls the 18 angry Democrats.
We just went through the Mueller witch hunt where you had really 18 angry Democrats that hate President Trump. They hate him with a passion. They were contributors in many cases to Hillary Clinton. Hate him with a passion. How they picked this panel, I don't know. And they came up with no collusion, and they actually also came up with no obstruction. But our Attorney General ruled, based on the information, there was no obstruction. So you have no collusion, no obstruction.
I love it when he talks about himself in the third person.
Yeah.
They hate President Trump. They hate him with a passion. It's
Right,
not
him.
me, him,
Yeah.
him. Right.
Right.
And, of course, he keeps coming back to the report. Here's my copy.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Isn't that cool?
Look at that.
UPS shop. You can just get it.
Oh.
Yeah,
sorry.
any
I know you can buy
UPS
it
shop.
on Amazon now, too.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. I don't know what it costs at Amazon, but this is a good job from the local UPS shop. But at any rate, it says,
No
he
collusion.
and Bill Barr both say. It says no collusion, no obstruction. That's not exactly what
It's
the
a little
report.
more complicated than
It
that.
is indeed. Yeah. There's plenty of collusion. There's plenty of obstruction. No conclusion of criminal conduct.
Right. And Barr took, collusion is sort of this word that the White House has adopted for a long time. Barr was repeating that, but Mueller makes clear that's not actually what he's looking at. He's looking at it if it was criminal conduct. He says that there were there were interactions between the campaign.
No, there were many, and many people involved in it. With
Russia,
meetings with Russia, and the Russians came, say we got some information, and they were very eager to get it.
They were eager to have it influence their campaign, but Mueller rules that there was no criminality on quote-unquote collusion. The obstruction part is more complicated. He laid out multiple instances when the president tried to interfere with the investigation, but ultimately said those were not successful because his aides, people like White House counsel Don McGahn, stopped him. And so that was why Mueller did not rule on obstruction of justice. Barr came to that conclusion, which Trump sort of alludes at the end there. But Barr was the one that said, because there was no criminal on quote-unquote collusion, we're going to say there was no obstruction just to put finality onto it. But Democrats do not see it that way.
Exactly. So that's what I want to get to, is that as far as Donald Trump is concerned, this is over and done with. They had the investigation. They came up with no obstruction, no collusion. And now it's time to move on. Democrats are saying, no, there are. In fact, Mueller himself says, while I do not reach a decision either way on obstruction, and if we could have cleared him, he says, we would have, but we couldn't. Now it's up to Congress. So Congress is, picking that up, and they want to hold some hearings. Now, here's what the president says about the fact that Congress wants to hold these hearings, and he said this yesterday about the Democrats in Congress. We got that?
These aren't like impartial people. The Democrats are trying to win 2020. They're not going to win with the people that I see, and they're not going to win against me. The only way they can maybe luck out, and I don't think that's going to happen, it might make it even the opposite. That's what a lot of people are saying. The only way they can luck out is by constantly going after me on nonsense.
So he said, in following up on that, by the way, I love that statement. The Democrats are not impartial people.
Right. By nature. Congress is not. People are members of parties.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like for the last 2 years we had an impartial group of people in charge.
You're a member of a party. You have certain beliefs.
Yeah.
Democrats do want to win in 2020. I mean, that's not true, but that doesn't mean.
Oh, breaking news.
Right.
Democrats want to win on 2020. But he has said, in following up on this, that as far as the administration is concerned, they're not going to cooperate in any way whatsoever. Right. It's going to be basically all out war. No documents, no tax returns, nobody testifies. And if they try to impeach, we'll go to the Supreme Court and say they don't have the right to do that. Right. So even short of impeachment, he says not going to cooperate with any of these investigations. Now, without the witnesses, without the documents, what can the Democrats do?
Well, they can just raise a lot of noise about the fact that the White House is not cooperating and question why they're not cooperating, and they'll go to court. They're not going to just let this go. And there is some precedent for the legislative branch has power to impeach a president if they have the votes. Mm-hmm. Right now, they certainly don't have the votes in the Senate to convict, but they could have the votes in the House. I'm not sure at this moment, but if this continues on and they uncover more things, they might. This doesn't go away just because the White House isn't going to play ball. I mean, they might not have star witnesses on TV, but they're not going to just say, okay, let's turn away from
And the
this.
other thing he says, I meant to mention this earlier, is he's going to invoke executive privilege, or is willing to prevent a Don McGahn from testifying.
Might be more complicated than that.
No, so this gets to, that's what I wanted to get your take on. This really gets to, doesn't it, a fundamental question of separation of powers.
Yes, and USA Today had an interesting article yesterday by my colleague who covers the Supreme Court on Trump's new star justice, Brett Kavanaugh, has ruled in the past in favor, or has, I don't know if he's ruled or he's made statements that the legislative branch absolutely has power here. And so, this goes to the courts, the judges, the constitutional justices might just rule against the president on this.
Right. I mean, those people who are, they say, follow the strict letter of the law, right? The originalists, if you will, with the if you read the Constitution, the original document, it's pretty clear in the separation of powers that there are certain powers that the executive has and certain powers the legislative has, and the executive cannot shut down the legislative branch.
Right, and that's something the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is very focused in on and has been for a really long time, the power of the legislative branch, that it is a co-equal branch of government, and they're not going to let this go lightly. And I just think that this might get dragged out all the way up until the election, but it doesn't go away by any means.
So we are seeing and can expect, and some hearings are already underway. It's the House Oversight Committee with Elijah Cummings, right? Mm-hmm. Intelligence with Adam Schiff. Judiciary, of course, with Jerry Nadler.
Right.
Banking with Maxine Waters.
Financial services,
right.
They're looking at sort of more the foreign.
The main fronts, I think, that we'll see.
Yes, and already next month we do have the Attorney General, Bill Barr, will be into the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee next week, back-to-back days.
Next week?
Next week. May 1st and 2nd. That's next week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Congress comes back after a 2-week recess. The Mueller report dropped in the middle of it. Most of them got to avoid our questions. They won't get to next week. And then Bill Barr shows up. And then they have made the request for Mueller. Barr has said he's okay with Mueller coming. So assuming that is something that Mueller will eventually do next month. And they've also made the subpoena for Don McGahn. That is one of the areas the White House is fighting. Another is to have Trump's attorney come in for his businesses. They're fighting that. They're fighting the tax returns. So there's all sorts of things that they're fighting, but we will have Barr in next week.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, I mentioned this earlier, Treasury Department missed its second deadline yesterday for release, a deadline given it by Congress for releasing the tax returns. And now I think it was May 6th.
Right.
Steve Mnuchin says, we'll make a decision by May 6th. You know what that decision is going
Don't
to be.
hold your breath. But so this, again, doesn't go away. This becomes probably a court battle. But Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal has invoked a section of the tax code that says that he and Chairman Grassley on financial services in the Senate, who's a Republican and is not going to do this, are the two people that can request any person's tax returns. So Neal did that to request Trump's through the Treasury Department. So the White House came out and said, we're not doing this. We're not giving the tax returns. They're not technically the ones that are being requested. It's the Treasury Department. Still part of Trump's administration. But the request is to Mnuchin, and it is legally Richard Neal is allowed to do that. So if they push back, expect that to get messy.
What weapons does the House have if they don't cooperate? They can hold people, I guess, in contempt of Congress?
Yep. And I believe that they could actually send Capitol Police to arrest someone if they wanted to go that route. There was some reporting that they were discussing fines.
Right, fining people if they did not comply.
Right. And they can go, which it is expected that they will, they can go the legal route. And they can go to a judge. And it could be, a judge, Trump says he'll go straight to the Supreme Court. It doesn't work quite like that. So you have to go through the legal process, and a judge could rule in their favor as well.
So it looks to me like Trump's strategy really is, and this is sort of, I think, should not come as a surprise because this is what he did his entire business career, right? Is sue.
Fight it out
to drag things up. Yeah, fight in the courts where win or lose, he drags it out. So is part of his strategy here to drag these things out until after 2020?
It absolutely could be. I mean, I think you
Looks
can't
like
ignore the timing.
Yeah.
But this could help Democrats because actually Pelosi is in sort of an uncomfortable position with her party on impeachment. There are starting to be some people who are saying there's enough here, let's do it. There are a lot of others who say no, but let's investigate. So if they do get stuck in the courts, Democrats can be very united on trying to get information and trying to fight the White House on this. And it also puts off the conversation of impeachment, which will divide Democrats. And so she's able to have her party united. And if this is constantly hanging over the president's head, some analysts say that could make him weaker into 2020, even if he has not been impeached.
Right. Well, I'm glad you went there because I wanted to ask you about impeachment next, which is, as you say, there are different voices on impeachment now. Almost everybody says, of course, Donald Trump committed impeachable offenses. Democrats say that, right? The question is, do we therefore go and start impeachment hearings or not? Elizabeth Warren took the lead last week among Democratic candidates saying yes. Kamala Harris joined her Monday night. I think Julian Castro has said the same thing. But the rest of them are saying, no, let's have these hearings first.
Right.
And Nancy Pelosi is saying sort of the same thing.
Right.
Don't rush into this, right?
Right. And
so what is the count now, do you believe? And will Nancy be able to hold the line?
Well, so far, Rashida Tlaib, a progressive congresswoman
from Michigan.
Yes. Who has a resolution to impeach the president. After the Bill Barr summary came out last month, just that 4-page letter where he said no collusion.
Right.
She went forward with this resolution.
Rashida Tlaib.
She only had one other person sign on. And most other Democrats sort of stepped back and said, look, this is a distraction. I talked to Ocasio-Cortez at that time, another progressive woman who is friends with Rashida Tlaib, and she said, yes, I think I'd like to see the president go, but this is not what we need to be talking about.
Right.
That's changed since the details of the report have come out. So Ocasio-Cortez has signed on, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is also a member of that sort of very progressive group, and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley have signed on. So It's not by any means a giant number of people, but there was a shift. Now, all of those people before would have liked to see Trump go. So it's not like they suddenly changed their minds. But they were not signing on to this resolution. They did. There are other members that I talked to, like Congresswoman Jackie Speer, who is close to Pelosi, who is sort of in that leadership circle. She's been around a really long time. Who, right after the Mueller report, pointed out what you mentioned earlier, saying Mueller is basically begging us to do something, and we'll have to see if what we find out means impeachment. But it felt significant to me because she is not a super progressive member. She is close to leadership. For her to say that's on the table. And then after that comment, we started to see other people, including Pelosi, say if that's where the facts lead, that's where they lead.
Right.
Which is a shift for her because a month ago she told me that impeachment was a gift to the president. So the fact that she's even now saying if the facts lead there is a small shift.
Right. But a lot of people do see it, and Bernie Sanders, even as progressive as he is, made this point in the debate on CNN or the CNN town hall Monday night. It would really suck up all the oxygen in the room, wouldn't it? I mean, you cover Congress.
Absolutely.
And that's all people would be talking about, right, for the next year and a half.
Absolutely.
Trump, Mueller.
And for all of those very loud progressive freshmen, there's a whole bunch of more moderate freshmen who are in very competitive seats who promise to work across the aisle, who promise to lower prescription drug prices, address health care, do infrastructure. There is no way that White House or Republicans work with Democrats and vice versa if they're impeachment proceedings. So there's a whole group of people who are in danger of losing their seat, and also 2020 candidates who would like the conversation to be about policies and how they can be different, that will not get to talk about those things if impeachment's on the table.
Right. So while we're speaking, of course, Donald Trump never stops tweeting. And he has, of course, noticed the fact that Joe Biden is in the race.
Of course.
I just have to share this with you and our listeners and viewers. Donald Trump just tweeting a couple of minutes ago, "Welcome to the race, Sleepy Joe."
He used that for Joe Donnelly as well. He likes saying Sleepy Joe.
He used that for Chuck Todd, too, didn't he? Sleepy Eyes Chuck or something?
Yes.
Yeah,
and then
Chuck
crying Chuck Schumer, different than Sleepy Eyes Chuck Todd.
Okay. "Welcome to the race, Sleepy Joe. I only hope you have the intelligence, long in doubt, to wage a successful primary campaign. It will be nasty." Primary campaign. "It will be nasty. You will be dealing with people who truly have some very sick and demented ideas. But if you make it, I will see you at the starting gate."
I love when Trump weighs in on the race. He has got all kinds of thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he can't resist. Right?
He can't resist. But
any
Biden
other president would be just
right. Don't address your
No.
Biden makes this White House and Republicans nervous. So Trump might be tweeting that, and Trump might not be himself nervous, but there are certainly a lot of Republicans who think that Biden could beat Trump.
Right.
Because he appeals to those working class voters that were Obama, and then they went for Trump. And in part, they might have been Obama because Biden was on the ticket. And that's who he's very focused on. But he also brings along, obviously, the Democratic coalition.
Right. No, we had... now, Standish was in yesterday from The Hill, who has written on that point, too, that the one that the White House seems to be most, they won't say it publicly, right, but privately, that they're watching most closely, right?
And he's a very experienced politician.
Right.
He's run a lot of races.
So how have you enjoyed this 2 weeks off?
Well, it didn't really feel like time off. The Mueller report dropped in the middle of it.
I know.
So
no coincidence, by the way, right?
Right, just right before Easter and Passover.
And Congress out of
Congress
out of town.
But
They come back next week.
They'll be back next week, and we will.
All right.
We're not going to forget about that report. We'll be asking
you'll be lying in wait for them. I know. We can count on that. Eliza Collins from USA Today. USAtoday.com. As promised, honored to welcome to the studio next one of those 2020 Democratic candidates for president. Get his comments on Joe Biden's entry into the race and also why he's running and how he expects to beat the rest of the field. Congressman John Delaney from Maryland coming up next here on the Bill Press Show. Eliza Collins, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
A quick break. We'll be right back.
The latest member of the Young Turks Network, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you get stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please.
Don't quit on me. Okay. But remember, it's not what you say. It's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees.
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
And on the Thursday, April 25, how about it? The Bill Press Show, live from our nation's capital, joining you everywhere in this great land of ours, coast to coast, on the radio, online, and on television. On the radio out in Chicago. Hello, WCPT, all you great listeners in Chicago and the Chicago area. On television, hello, all of you Free Speech TV good folks. And online on YouTube, youtube.com, joining you worldwide on the great YouTube channel and with all the news of the day. Again, we are expecting any moment now, Congressman John Delaney, former Congressman John Delaney, candidate for president 2020, the first one to jump into the race on a very important day, the day that, so Congressman will be here, we're told, very shortly. Again, it's a big day because we got if he's the first, the most recent of the Democrats to announce for president is none other than former Vice President Joe Biden, who made it official this morning. His plan is a release of the video today. He has a big fundraiser tonight in Philadelphia, and then Monday he will do his official big crowd launch in Pittsburgh, a launch that's sponsored in large part by labor unions, particularly the International Association of Firefighters under President Harold Schaitberger and the United Steelworkers under President Leo Gerard. Here's just a little bit from Joe Biden's video.
Everything that has made America America is at stake. That's why today I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
And Joe Biden says it's all about who we are as Americans, and the contrast with what President Trump said down in Charlottesville.
And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
Joe Biden, former vice president, former United States senator, 8 years as vice president, I think some 20 years as, I forget now exactly, as a United States senator from Delaware, head of both the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. It certainly brings a wealth of experience to the race. He's certainly left of center, but more a center-left Democrat. But still, but again, a true progressive as well. Maybe not as progressive as Bernie Sanders. Certainly not as progressive as Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, but still a progressive left of center Democrat. And one that a lot of Democrats are relieved to see because they feel he can. He's steady. Normal is a word that's used. He is someone who can appeal to the area, particularly the Midwest blue-collar voters who abandoned the Democratic Party in 2016 for Donald Trump, voters in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Illinois and Pennsylvania, and that Joe Biden's a person who can bring them back to the Democratic fold. He is rumored to be the candidate that the White House most fears having to run against because he is so steady. 76 years old, but that's still a year younger than Bernie Sanders. And it looks like the age issue isn't that much of an issue anymore. Joe Biden, the question is, I guess, can he prove that he has this experience, but he's still enough in step with the Democratic Party today, which is certainly more progressive than it was when Joe Biden first arrived on the scene, or even when Barack Obama first arrived on the scene. Can Joe Biden prove that he's still in step with that new more rambunctious and progressive Democratic Party today? The Morning Consult Politico poll this morning shows that were the election actually held today, Joe Biden would hold an 8-point advantage over Donald Trump. We know these early polls are roughly meaningless, but still, it shows that he's got a lot of support among the American people. According to Politico, Joe Biden would beat Donald Trump today by 8 points, 42 to 34. And of course, in every poll taken among the 2020 Democratic candidates, even before today's announcement, Joe Biden was consistently number one, Bernie Sanders consistently number two. So no doubt Biden will be, he comes into the race as the front runner. He will be a major force, but it's not going to be automatic for him either. for sure. Meanwhile, by the way, before we I want to talk about some of the other Democratic candidates who were on the stage yesterday down in Houston. Before we do this, just one little story that I haven't been able to mention this morning because it wasn't a place for it. So I just want to get it in right now. I don't know whether you saw that there's a big summit going on today. This summit in Vladivostok, Russia, a summit between Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. So here are the two autocrats, right? The two thugs, who Donald Trump's two favorite people, who are basically getting together to plot against him. Donald Trump giving support for North Korea, economic support for North Korea, where the United States is still screwing on the sanctions on North Korea until they agree to get rid of their nuclear weapons. And yet these two leaders getting together over there, we have to wonder what Donald Trump thinks about that. It's almost like they're cheating on him, stabbing him in the back. And the other thing that I find fascinating about this summit is that Kim Jong-un arrived by train. Yeah, he really doesn't like to fly. Of course, he did fly to Singapore to meet President Trump. But if he can take the train, that he will. Took the train all the way from North Korea to Vladivostok. And there are pictures today when the train arrived. Before he exited the train, there were white-gloved North Korean staffers who wiped down the entire train, wiped any dust off the train, so that when the dear leader emerged from the train, he wouldn't get any dust on his hands or on his clothes, or God forbid, on his shoes. They had the red carpet rolled out that he stepped on. So another world, but a little insight into how real Donald Trump's foreign policy, how real, what progress we've made, if any, with North Korea, despite two summits, Kim Jong-un behind his back going and making economic deals with Russia to get around the U.S. sanctions. Okay, back to the Democratic candidates yesterday, joining in Houston in front of a big rally organized by the organization She the People. This was the She the People Leadership Conference, and all of the Democrats were asked one simple question. These are women of color, She the People. And they invited the Democratic candidates to come and ask the basic question. You know, we're women, we are women of color, we are political activists. Why should we support you? We're looking for the candidate who can beat Donald Trump. Why should we support you among all the candidates? Why should we support you for president? In no particular order, each of them approached it in a little different way. Just a little flavor of the field. Here is Amy Klobuchar.
I can't pretend to be in your shoes. I'm in one of your shoes as the first woman in many of the jobs I've had, and I know what it's like to be in that room when people aren't taking you seriously.
Yep. So, I'm not a woman of color, but I'm a woman, and I've been there. I can identify with you, and so we've got something in common here. Bernie Sanders, neither woman nor a woman of color, says it doesn't matter. Look at my record. I'm on your side.
Look at my record and look at what I have campaigned on. Many of the ideas that I brought forth 4 years ago are now widely accepted by the American people and Democratic candidates from school board to President of the United States. So my campaign is about not just winning the nomination, not just defeating Trump. It is the understanding that we cannot transform this country unless millions of people, black and white and Latino, Asian American, Native American, stand up and take on the very powerful, greedy special interests who dominate the economic and political life of this country.
Bernie Sanders before the She the People. With Beto O'Rourke, his pitch was, look, again, I may not be one of you, but I'm going to go around this country and listen to as many of you as I can.
Not something that I'm owed. not something that I expect, something that I fully hope to earn by the work that I do on the campaign trail, by showing up and listening to the people that I want to serve.
So I've listened to them. I'll listen to you, says Beto O'Rourke. Cory Booker, a particularly emotional appeal to the group. He's done this before, talking about his mother, and certainly as an African American, was able to speak directly to them through his mother, if you will.
You know, as a man that was raised by a strong black woman who understood and taught me from my very earliest of ages the debt that I owe, women of color can trust me as someone for my entire career has been rooted in the communities that have empowered me to be who I am today.
I want to skip Elizabeth Warren here, McKenna, for just a minute, because Julian Castro has, again, made that same point. He does in almost every speech. He did in his announcement down in San Antonio about two women of color who really influenced his entire political career.
I am only here because of two very strong women of color. I have dedicated my time in public service to making sure that people just like my mother and my grandmother could do better in this country. It's why I focused in my time as mayor and as HUD secretary so much on trying to deliver for communities that are vulnerable, that are struggling.
And it is a diverse field among the Democratic candidates for sure, young and old, gay and straight, male and female. Still only one woman of color who is running, and that is Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris said, again, this is who I am, and these are the issues that I have always fought for.
I am a leader on the issue of maternal mortality that invariably and disproportionately impacts women of color, on my history and long-term work in terms of education, including what I'm proposing right now, which is to close the teacher pay gap, which will disproportionately impact children of color and the women of color that are raising them. For my work on criminal justice reform, my work when it comes to economic security and health for women and women of color. There is a long history of work I have done, including my mentorship of young women of color in politics and in the professions. And I would stake my reputation in terms of what I will do going forward based on what I've done, and I believe you can judge me that way.
And one more time, it was Elizabeth Warren, just as I thought she was the standout, most impressive of the five candidates Monday night on CNN's successive town halls. Elizabeth Warren wowing this crowd again yesterday. She certainly has a strong capacity to inspire an audience. Lots of energy, Elizabeth Warren, yesterday in front of She the People. Why me?
We got a room full of people here who weren't given anything. We got a room full of people here who had to fight for what they believe in. We have a room full of people here who had to reach down deep, and no matter how hard it was, no matter how scary it looked, they found what they needed to find, and they brought it up, and they took care of the people they loved. They fought the fights they believe in. That's how they got into these seats today. It's how are we going to fight? Not just individually, but how are we going to fight together? Are we going to fight because we're afraid? Are we going to show up for people that we didn't actually believe in, but because we were too afraid to do anything else? That's not who we are. That's not how we're going to do this.
Yep, Elizabeth Warren on fire. That's, every time you hear her, just about, she's on fire. She's the one been out there with the most big ideas, and she certainly, I think, made the best impression yesterday on that front. Interestingly enough, by the way, to my knowledge, and I've read a lot about it this morning and listened to all those clips, She the People, the organization, did not endorse yesterday. They wanted to hear from all the candidates first. One candidate, by the way, who was not there was Kirsten Gillibrand, who appeared on The View yesterday. And she was asked about, it was Kirsten Gillibrand who was the very first one to come out and say that way back, Al Franken, when those photograph of him came out from a tour to visit the troops, where it looked like he was reaching out to touch the breast of a fellow reporter there, comedian there, came out. Kirsten Gillibrand said Al Franken had to resign from the Senate, could no longer serve for the Me Too movement, and a lot of people, myself included, hold that against her. I think Al Franken should still be a United States senator. That was far from what we saw with Donald Trump and the Access Hollywood tape, far from Harvey Weinstein, far from Bill O'Reilly. You go down the list, Charlie Rose. But Al Franken was forced to give up his Senate seat. Kirsten Gillibrand, a lot of Democrats still hold that against her. She was asked yesterday whether that's going to hurt her in this race, and she says, well, let her speak to it.
No, I don't. I do think there are a few very influential and powerful Democratic donors and elites who are angry about it. But if they're going to be angry about me standing up for women who were groped, that's on them. And if you believe that standing up for women is important in this country, go to KirstenGillibrand.com and support this campaign.
Notice the audience didn't applaud when she said that. I do think she's kidding herself if she doesn't think that people remember that, and it is going to be held against her, and I believe should be. Speaking of candidates who didn't show up yesterday, we'll talk about one who didn't show up today. Yep, John Delaney. Look, with all due respect, if you're a candidate for president and you want the attention of a progressive audience, a national progressive audience, and you book that progressive audience and you don't show, you don't deserve anybody's vote as far as I'm concerned. You're nothing but a flake. And I would say that about John Delaney. He wouldn't even call in given the opportunity. Not only did he not show up. So I think you can judge his campaign a lot by what we saw this morning. We've given the opportunity of every presidential candidate to appear with us. And we've heard from many of them. We will give everybody the opportunity. Today was John Delaney's turn. He, for whatever reason, no idea. We just finally heard that he's not going to show up and not going to call either. And, who knows? Who knows? I can guarantee you this. He won't get another chance. So if I were you, take the list of 20 Democratic candidates. You can cross one of them off and just talk about 19. So sorry we didn't bring you John Delaney. And I wanted really to hear from him about who he is, what he stands for, why he dares think that he should be our next president, and how he figured that he would be able to get to the top of the ticket against some of these other big candidates. But we won't have that opportunity. Too bad. On other news of the day, too bad for him and too bad for you. On other news of the day, again, we've talked about Donald Trump and this war, basically, that he has declared against Congress. The Democrats in Congress, particularly, we're talking about the House, of course, and their attempt to hold their hearings, and his pledge that he's not going to cooperate with them in any way whatsoever. Let's hear one more time. This is the president yesterday on his way out to Marine One on the South Lawn of the White House, where he talks about and makes his pledge not to cooperate with Democrats in Congress.
These aren't like impartial people. The Democrats are trying to win 2020. They're not going to win with the people that I see, and they're not going to win against me. The only way they can maybe luck out, and I don't think that's going to happen, it might make it even the opposite. That's what a lot of people are saying. The only way they can luck out is by constantly going after me on nonsense.
And with that, the White House announced that the administration will not only not cooperate, they will aggressively try to block any attempts by Democrats to, A, secure any documents, any financial records, any tax returns, or B, to get any of the key people in the administration, particularly those named in the Mueller report, to testify on Capitol Hill, and if necessary, the president said, invoke executive privilege to block them from testifying, or even go so far as to go to the United States Supreme Court and try to block them from testifying, which, as we discussed a little bit earlier with Eliza Collins, will set up a classic confrontation over separation of powers, and really very interesting, I think, be the test for the so-called conservative judges on the Supreme Court. Are they going to follow the Constitution, which gives clear, equal standing to the executive branch and the legislative branches of government? Are the conservatives going to uphold the fundamental principles of the Constitution, or are they going to just express their loyalty to the man of their party, the leader of their party, to Donald Trump? So on several fronts, this is going to be very interesting to watch. I think what Donald Trump is trying to do is fight it all the way. Number one, because he doesn't want us to know what's in these documents. He doesn't want us to hear what Don McGahn or Robert Mueller have to say. But the other is he just wants to drag it out using the courts, using these phony lawsuits to drag the whole thing out until after the 2020 election, thinking that that's the only way that he can get reelected. The one thing we can count on, though, is that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Elijah Cummings, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Steny Hoyer, the Democratic leadership, is not going to just stand by and let Donald Trump get away with that. One other thing that came out about the White House and the president's, this just sort of relates to the Mueller report. Kirsten, she's no longer there, but Kirsten Nielsen, the former HHS secretary, the New York Times reported yesterday. It's actually front page this morning, New York Times. She was very concerned about if the Russians were up to all their tricks in 2016, what might they be doing in 2020? So she went to the White House and said to the chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, I got a real concern here. We have information already through our intelligence agencies that the Russians are gearing up to try to play games, interfere with the 2020 presidential election the same way they did in the 2016. I think we got to do something about that. And Mick Mulvaney, according to the New York Times, told her, don't mention it to Donald Trump. He doesn't want to hear about that. He gets very upset if you talk about what the Russians might have done in 2016 or might do in 2020, because he thinks you're questioning the legitimacy of his presidency. So the Russians are up to their old games again, we hear, and Donald Trump, again, will both deny it and then do nothing about it. That kind of wraps it up here for this Thursday, April 25, folks. It's good to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to be up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for a speech tomorrow. Chris Liu will be filling in, so we'll be looking for you with Chris Liu tomorrow on The Bill Press Show.
The Bill Press Show.